His arrival at the ball created a great stir. Everyone swung around to greet him. One still holding his cards, another interrupting his argument just as he was ready to clinch it. And the judge answered. He left the court's answer hanging in the air and rushed to greet our hero. Pavel Ivanovich Chichikov. Good gracious, it's Mr. Chichikov in person. Here comes our dear Pavel Ivanovich. Dear Pavel Ivanovich. Where are you, Mr. Chichikov? Allow me to embrace you. Give him over here. I want to kiss our dear Chichikov. Chichikov found himself in several embraces simultaneously. Before he had time to scramble out of the arms of the governor, he was already girt by those of the police chief, who passed him on to the health inspector, and thence to the government contractor and the architect. The governor, who, while talking to some ladies, had been holding a piece of candy paper in one hand and a lapdog in the other, dropped both on the floor at the sight of Chichikov, the dog yelping in the process. In short, Chichikov's arrival created an extraordinarily joyful commotion. Not a single face failed to express joy, or at least to reflect the joy of others, just like the faces of petty officials being inspected by visiting superiors. After their first scare, they realize that the visitor approves of much of what he is seeing, and has even condescended to make a joke, that is, to smile pleasantly and mutter a few words. The petty officials right next to him laugh very loudly. Those who are farther away and who could not have heard too much of what he said, laughing even louder, wholeheartedly. And even the police officer standing by the door, who has never been seen to laugh but only to threaten people with his fist, even he, submitting to the unalterable law of reflection, displays some semblance of a smile, although it looks more like a longing to sneeze after a strong dose of snuff. Chichikov acknowledged one and all, displaying, he felt, uncanny agility. He bowed right and left in a very relaxed manner, although slightly sideways as usual, and everyone found him charming. The ladies immediately formed a glittering wreath around him, bringing with them clouds of scent of all kinds. One breathed out the aroma of a rose, the next the fragrance of spring and violets. A third was soaked through with mignonette, so that all Chichikov had to do was to lift his nose and sniff. There was an incredible display of good taste in the ladies' attire. Muslins, satins, tulles of such pastel shades in the latest fashion that names have still not been found for them. Such is the point refined taste has reached. Bows, ribbons, and corsages of flowers seem to have been fastened haphazardly on gowns by some nonchalant hand, although in fact a clever head had given a lot of thought to where the nonchalant hand should pin these adornments. Their light headesses, barely balanced on their ears, seemed to warn teasingly, I'd have wafted her into the air if only I could lift the beauty. It must be noted that the ladies of the town were, on the whole, on the heavy side, although they were very good at lacing themselves and had such delightful manners that their heaviness was not noticeable. And besides, their tightly encased waists were very shapely and pleasing to the eye. Everything they wore was planned and designed with the utmost thoroughness. As much of their necks and shoulders were exposed as was needed, and no more. Each of them put on display just enough of her property to bring out the downfall of a man. The rest was concealed with exquisite taste, either by some light ribbon, or by a scarf lighter than whipped cream, or by the little crenelated lace edges of a modesty, which were allowed to show around the shoulders from under the dress. These modesties concealed both in front and back things that could not possibly bring about a man's downfall, while leading him to believe that his downfall was hidden precisely there. The long gloves did not quite meet the sleeves, but thoughtfully left bare the exciting part of the arm above the elbow, which on many of the ladies was attractively fresh and plump. In fact, the gloves of many ladies had split because they had wished to have them as tight as possible. In general, they seemed to have followed the adage, this is no mere provincial town. This is another Paris. Only here and there could one catch a glimpse of some incredible bonnet or perhaps a most unfashionable peacock feather. But this couldn't be helped, such is the nature of a provincial center. Somewhere, somehow, it will always trip over something. Facing the ladies, Chichikov wondered. Which one is the author of the letter? He stuck out his nose a little, but it came up against a whole swirl of elbows, cuffs, sleeves, fragrant blouses, and dresses. The dancing was going full tilt. The postmaster's wife, the police captain, a lady with a pale blue feather, Prince Shiphedaladais from Georgia, a Petersburg official, a Moscow official, Kuku the Frenchman, Perkanovsky, Barabindovsky, all of them had taken off and were now rushing and swirling about. There they go, Chichikov muttered, backing up. And as soon as the ladies had regained their seats, he returned to his search, trying to guess by their expressions which of them had written the letter. But neither the authoress' facial expression nor her eyes gave her away. In all of them he detected, however, something very subtle, something incredibly subtle. No, Chichikov said under his breath. A woman is such a phenomenon. At this point his hand made a gesture of hopelessness. What's there to talk about? Just try and describe all the expressions that slide over their faces, all those hints and emanations. Just take the eyes of any one of them. It's such an infinite realm. A man will start a journey there and never be heard of again. They'll never get him back out, not even with a hook. Just try and describe their sheen. Liquid, velvety, honeyed. God knows what sorts of sheens exist. Hard, mellow, and even altogether tender. Or, as some put it, full of a caress. Or without a caress. But especially when there's a caress in it, it will clutch your heart and pass a sort of violin bow over your entire soul. No, there's no way of expressing it. All one can say is that women are the deluxe articles in the store of life. I'm sorry to have this expression, picked up in the street, come from the mouth of my hero. But what can I do? Such is the lot of an author in Russia. If a word from the street has found its way into a book, the fault lies with the readers and, above all, those readers who belong to high society. You'll never hear a good Russian expression out of them. They'll give you more expressions in French, German, and English than you'll ever ask for. And they'll give them with all sorts of pronunciations. In French, talking through their noses and fishing their R's right out of their throats. English, they'll pronounce like Englishmen and birds and even take on bird-like expressions while doing so, and, what's more, laugh at those who can't manage to make a bird's face. But they'll never give you any Russian, although, once in a while, they may have a Russian log cabin built on their summer estates out of sheer patriotism. This is how the readers of high society are, and along with them, those who claim to belong to high society. This, however, does not prevent them from being very demanding. They require that everything be written in the most severe, pure, and lofty language. Probably they expect the Russian language to come down to us spontaneously from the clouds, full-blown, and land directly on the tips of our tongues, so that they'd have nothing more difficult to do than open their mouths and stick their tongues out. There is no doubt that the distaff half of the world is complicated, but the worthy reading public is more complicated still. In the meantime, Chichikov was losing all hope of identifying the lady letter writer. As he desperately scrutinized the ladies, he met responsive looks from them that were enough to instill both hope and sweet torment in a poor mortal heart. Finally, he decided, no, it's impossible to tell. This, however, didn't at all interfere with his feeling of contentment. He gracefully exchanged a few pleasant words with some of the ladies, walking up to one, then another, with short, mincing steps, as old dandies usually walk, who wear built-up shoes and turn around the ladies with the agility of miniature stallions. Having taken a few mincing steps to the right and then to the left, he traced a wiggle the shape of a little tail or comma on the parquet floor with his foot. The ladies were delighted, and not only found many charming traits in him, but also discovered a regal touch in his expression, and something impressive and warlike about his bearing, a thing which ladies are usually attracted by. They even began quarreling about him. Since he usually elected to stand near the door, many ladies were anxious to occupy the chair just next to the door. And when one of them managed to install herself, others, who had been trying to get there first, suddenly felt quite disgusted with the first's blatant shamelessness. Chichikov was so absorbed in his conversation with the ladies, or rather the ladies had so thoroughly enveloped him and made him dizzy with chatter interlarded with the most complex, subtle hints and allegories, which he tried to solve and interpret, that he forgot to pay his respects to his hostess. This only occurred to him when he heard the voice of the governor's wife herself, who had been standing unnoticed at his side for several minutes. Tossing her head up and down very prettily, his hostess said to him in a warm, even playful tone, "Oh, Pavel Ivanovitch, so there you are." I cannot report exactly what she said after, but it was something extremely amiable, something in the style in which characters communicate in our fashionable drawing-room novels, designed to prove that their authors are well versed in the refined tone of society. E.g., "Is it possible that others have taken possession of your heart, so that there's no room in it, not even a tiny corner, for those whom you have left out so cruelly?" Chichikov immediately turned his attention to the governor's wife and was about to deliver himself of a compliment that could have held its own against those paid by the heroes of modern novels, Zvansky, Linsky, Grimmin, and other elegant military gentlemen, when he raised his eyes and stopped as if struck by lightning. The governor's wife was not alone. She held the arm of a young girl of 16, with fair hair and fresh complexion, fine features and a pointed chin, with a delightful oval contour to the head that a painter might have used as a model for a Madonna, a shape that is quite rare in Russia, where everything likes to spread wide. Mountains, forests, steppes, faces, lips, legs, everything. And Chichikov recognized in her the blonde young girl he had met when, driving away from Nozdrev's, his carriage had collided with another through the stupidity of the drivers or of the horses, and when Uncle Mitye and Uncle Minye had tried to disentangle the mess. Chichikov became so confused that he couldn't utter a sensible word, just mumbling God knows what rubbish, such as a hero of a fashionable novel would never have let pass his lips. "Ah, you haven't met my daughter," the governor's wife said. "She has just graduated from a finishing school for young ladies." He replied that he had had the pleasure of meeting her once before by accident. He tried to add something, but somehow didn't succeed. The governor's wife said a few more words, after which she left to join the other guests, carrying her daughter off with her. Chichikov stood there, motionless like a man who has gone out for a pleasant stroll, ready to take in the sights, when suddenly he feels he has forgotten something. There's nothing more foolish looking than a man in this condition. He tries to remember what he's forgotten. His handkerchief? But there's his handkerchief in his pocket. Money? Oh, his money's there too. In fact, he seems to have everything, yet a voice tells him that he has forgotten something. And now he stares blankly and confusedly at the moving human throng, at the carriages flashing by, at the shakos and rifles of a passing regiment, at a signboard, not really seeing anything. In the same way, Chichikov suddenly felt himself apart from everything, while around him subtle, amiable hints and questions were being fired at him through fragrant female lips, such as, "May we, wretched creatures of the earth, be bold enough to ask a penny for your thoughts? In what blissful regions do your thoughts repose? Won't you tell us the name of the person who has plunged you into the valley of such sweet dreams? But these pleasant phrases failed to rouse Chichikov's distracted attention and were lost as if thrown overboard. His good manners failed him to such an extent that, leaving the ladies behind, he walked off, trying to see where the governor's wife and her daughter had gone. But the ladies wouldn't give up that easily. Each of them decided to use the most effective weapons in her arsenal. It must be noted at this juncture that some ladies, I say some, have a little weakness. If they discover an attractive feature in themselves, whether it be forehead, mouth, or hands, they always imagine that this particular feature will immediately strike all those they meet, and that they'll exclaim in one voice, "Look! Just look at her magnificent Grecian nose! What a delightful forehead she has!" Now a lady whose shoulders are beautiful feels certain that all the young men will be swept off their feet and are bound to repeat as she passes near them, "Oh, what magnificent shoulders," without bothering to look closely at her face, her hair, her nose, or her forehead. And even if they did notice them, they'd see them as things having no connection with her whatsoever. Thus do certain ladies reason, and each lady promised herself to deploy all her charms during the dances and put on a display of the trumps she possessed. During the waltz, the postmaster's wife lowered her head so voluptuously that it was, indeed, an extraordinary sight. A very charming lady who hadn't intended to dance at all because, as she put it, of a slight incommodity in the shape of a corn on her right foot, which necessitated her wearing low-heeled plush slippers, couldn't resist and did a few turns, slippers and all, just so that the postmaster's wife shouldn't take on too many airs.